Good evening and welcome to Watchmen on the Wall. Thank you for joining us. Tonight I have a special guest in the studio by the name of Debbie Kirsten, or should I call you Deborah Kirsten?
Whatever, Errol, either's good.
Welcome to the studio. It's good to have you on the show.
Thank you, thanks.
Now, Debbie, you've written an interesting book, your autobiography called Chai, Tea and Ginger Beer. And this is the story of your life as a very busy mom, wife, and journalist. Tell us a little bit about this book.
Well, you say chai, tea and ginger beer. Everyone always says, gosh, where on earth did you get that crazy title? So that's another question which we could go into. But Chai, Tea and Ginger Beer, yeah, it's my first book, Errol. It is an autobiography and, yeah, really just a collection of stories. You know, I'm a great believer that there's power in stories, and really what I've done is put a book together that is stories from my childhood and right up to then meeting and marrying my husband, and then, yeah, everything subsequent, kids. And so it's just stories, sad ones, funny ones, serious ones, all anecdotes, but I sort of chose them as stories that have kind of had an impact on our life, stories that relate to struggles that we've had, or different stories where different learning has come out of it for maybe myself, for Gary, for us as a family. So yeah, that's Chai, Tea and Ginger Beer.
But there is a very important message in this book, in that you're telling a story of a young woman that is married to a cricket star. Gary Kirsten is your husband. And you're also the mother of 3 children, 11, 8, and 3. And you also, now if that wasn't enough, if being married to cricket legend Gary Kirsten wasn't enough, you're the daughter of Michael Cassidy, one of the most respected and prominent Christian leaders in South Africa, and my personal hero. Okay? So this makes you a very special person. But prior to going on air, we were talking about just being the wife of a cricket star and a legend like your daddy's, Michael Cassidy, how sometimes that can make you feel a little bit insignificant. Now, I find that amazing that being the person you are, that you could still have those feelings. Tell us about that.
Well, it's funny. I grew up as Michael Cassidy's daughter and then got married and became Gary Kirsten's wife. So I suppose somewhere in between that, you do have to find your own identity and become Deborah Cassidy and Deborah Kirsten. And I think it's something everyone experiences, Errol, is living in different people's shadows, whether it's a friend, a mother, a father, a husband, a wife. But I think it's very significant for women. I think many of us tend to live in the shadows of often of our husbands, and I suppose that often happens because we feel the work we do is a little less significant. Maybe we're not the breadwinner. Maybe our days are spent, lifting and carrying kids and changing nappies and doing those sorts of things. That there's not often a lot of really tangible results of our days and ways to measure success that, by the way the world judges, certainly. So I think it's very easy for women to fall into a trap of feeling insignificant, feeling that what they do and what they spend their days doing is insignificant or less important than their husbands or other people in their life. And certainly for me, it was certainly a process of coming to a place, especially I think marrying Gary. Just suddenly you're in this world, this very big shadow, and everywhere you go, everyone wants to talk to your husband. They want to ask him questions. They're not really interested in you. You the one who gets pushed aside so that they can get the autograph, and you the one who gets asked to take the photograph. I always joke that I think I know how to use every cell phone camera that's ever been invented. So it is something that you start to battle with, of where do I fit in? My world seems to be about cricket, and everyone's interested in cricket, and how do I establish myself and my own identity in this space?
That's very important, your own identity, because I know it sometimes happens with my wife, where people will introduce her and say, this is Errol Naidoo's wife. and not mention a name. So did that happen to you?
That's a standard, actually.
This is Gary Kirsten's wife. This is Michael Cassidy's daughter.
They move on to the next person.
And they don't mention your name.
You know, I think Errol, it is part of the package, and it's certainly something that I've never become resentful of. When I married Gary, I realized, well, this is a different world that I'm walking into. But it is about coming to a place of having your own self-confidence, so not feeling insecure with that, and coming to terms with it and accepting it and dealing with it.
Yeah, I like this Joy magazine article that was done recently of you and Gary and I speak, and there's some great pics of your family in the article. But it's Mom with a Message, Deborah Kirsten. That's what the article is entitled, Mom with a Message. Now, I'm thinking about Gary Kirsten when he played for the Proteas, and then obviously then became the manager of the Indian cricket side, which means he was living in India at the time, and you had to travel up and down and manage your children, manage your life. It makes my head spin just thinking about that, having to do all of that. And like you say, all the attention and on Gary and all the things that goes. How do you juggle all of this, Mom of 3 small kids, the traveling, running your home, all of that? Just tell us about that.
Errol, I don't juggle it with ease, and I don't always juggle it very well. It's certainly our time in India was a crazy time, wonderful. We absolutely loved it. Gary coached the team for 3 years, and it just didn't really seem feasible to settle there because the team is on the move all the time. So we did this kind of commute between South Africa, so the kids could sort of maintain some kind of normality at school and home. But we were 1 month in India, 1 month in South Africa, and it was just a crazy time. Your suitcases were always warm, just going in and out like that. And how did I juggle it with difficulty, to be honest? I think that living that way, it's not ideal, and it's certainly not ideal with kids. You know, when Gary was playing and we were traveling, that sort of worked. But as soon as you throw 2 young kids into the mix, and you're throwing India in the mix, which is not the easiest place to travel with little kids. Yes. Every meal sort of becomes a bit of a mountain to climb with them in India. But yeah, I had to just be flexible, just roll with the punches. Thankfully I'm not a perfectionist, so I just kind of roll with the way that things go. But it was really dedicating those 3 years to my family, and saying, you know what, this is a time that I had been working as a journalist, and I tried to carry it on for a few months or into Gary's coaching time, and it just didn't work. So I really found that I had to come to terms with the fact that this was a season that I had to support Gary and keep our family together. So I just had to be focused on that and really just roll with that crazy lifestyle.
Yeah. And a lot of those stories are in this book, Chai Tea and Ginger Beer. Tell us a little bit, tell us about why you entitled the book Chai Tea and Ginger.
Well, I'm sure you visited India, Errol, and you'll know that in India, chai tea is what you get served at pretty much every social gathering, every negotiation. If you're buying something on a street corner, the shopkeeper will offer you a cup of chai tea. It's a little sweet cup of tea that's made from the masala spices. And but chai tea and ginger beer, why the title? I think I chose that firstly, but the title was a crazy journey in itself, because we went through every cricketing terminology. So at one day it was running between the wickets, the next it was opening partner, the next it was my spin on the ball. And interesting, you know, they never really gelled with me. And I think the reason they didn't gel with me was it wasn't my story, it wasn't my title. Once again, it was trying to make it sort of more Gary's story. And chai tea and ginger beer just resonated with me because it felt like me. I'm a creative person. I I wanted something quirky and different. And really what they do is represent the two elements of the book that come out very strongly. The ginger beer referring to, I open the book with the scene of Mom used to make these wonderful big bottles of ginger beer, homemade ginger beer growing up, and sort of the ginger beer that's made from the ginger beer root. And I really use that as a metaphor for our home roots, for family, for all the aspects in the book where I talk about family and the importance of it, and the importance of the roots, certainly, which I came from. And as you know a lot about those, an incredibly privileged upbringing in a Christian home, where Mum and Dad just really planted strong roots. So that's the ginger beer side of the book, and I still make that for my kids today, and sort of touches on the elements of how Gary and I have managed our family and put the value on that. And then the chai tea is really all the anecdotes refers to all the anecdotes in the book that are the exotics. Just so much amazing travel that cricket has afforded us, right from Gary's playing days to his coaching of India and then coaching South Africa. So the chai tea, I guess, for me, symbolizes, especially our time in India, just the amazing way the Indian people and the country welcomed us into their lives and their homes, and the rest of the stories in the book that are about the exotic. They're about the touring, they're about the travel. So that's how the title came about, the two sort of elements that are in the book.
I read a summary of the article in Joy magazine, and just the summary was so interesting, especially your experiences in India. And I'm trying to imagine Gary Kirsten led the Indian side to World Cup cricket glory. So he's obviously a god in India. How do people relate to you guys when they see you after that win?
Well, you know, pretty much the day you start traveling with the Indian team and become part of the Indian team, you just become this any national celebrity. Anyone connected to cricket in India is that. Okay. So you can't pretty much go anywhere. I mean, I could go out of the hotel with the kids and, you know, they'd often send security guards with me or something. But Gary, I mean, he literally became like one of those cricketers. He couldn't really move outside the security of the hotel because he would just get mobbed. We couldn't go to shopping malls or public, you know, hard to go to public restaurants, anything like that, because there's just the people are absolutely crazy about cricket. And there are a lot of people there. So when you're in a shopping mall and they get wind that a cricketer or someone connected to the team is around, before you know it, I mean, I remember one incident, we had to get security people to take us, because before we knew it, and I had the kids with me, there were 80 or 100 people around us. And it was actually quite funny because I tell the story in the book. The security of the mall, they started to panic and they didn't quite know what to do with Gary because they had to protect him. So they put him in a children's playpen. You know, in the malls they have those little play areas for kids. Okay, so there Gary was lumped in the middle of the kids' playpen with a little white picket fence around. But it was a crazy whirlwind time, and you know, when you with the likes of Sachin Tendulkar and you're traveling with those guys, there is just such a constant hype. And then of course the World Cup was really the cherry on the top. So since then, still Gary can't really move very freely around India because that sort of turned him into a bit of a cricketing icon in the eyes of the Indian people.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Yeah. So, winning the World Cup trophy, I mean, it was huge in India. I know, I've seen the footage. So my people are grateful to you and your husband for that World Cup title. Thank you. But we want to talk more about the book. We want to talk more about your roots with Michael and Carol Cassidy. And we're going to a break now, but more with Debbie Kirsten when we come back. Welcome back to the program. I'm speaking to Debbie Kirsten about her new book, Chai Tea and Ginger Beer. Now, Debbie, we were talking about your role as a wife of Gary Kirsten, and his role as a cricketer, traveling, lots of travel, India, all of those things. But you mentioned something that's very important, and that is your roots, growing up as Michael and Carol Cassidy's daughter. Now, obviously, growing up in a strong, loving Christian family like that prepared you for who you are today. You're a busy wife, you're a busy mother, you're a journalist, you're doing lots of things, but you still need to keep your focus on the Lord. You need to keep your focus on the important things like being the wife to Gary, being the mom to your 3 children. How did that, growing up in that home, prepare you and help you for who you are today?
Yeah, I think there's no stronger root in my life, certainly, than that gift that my parents gave me of having Christian faith. And I always look back at my childhood and feel so privileged that it also was the way it was. It wasn't a home that was very pious or very religious. It was a home where I always liken it to the process of osmosis. It was just the most natural thing to have this relationship with Jesus, and that's what it was about. It wasn't strictly about church and rules. It was about a personal relationship. And I feel so grateful that was the gift and not all about religion, as it were. You know, of course we went to church, but it was a very natural part of our home. You know, Bible stories in the evening, prayers with mom and dad, just conversations. You know, it was a home with very open communication, and I remember we used to have little things called the family powwow, and I was the secretary and had to take the minutes at the family powwow. But that was a forum around the dinner table where we would get to talk about things, talk about anything from what we thought we should be doing for an upcoming holiday, or what we weren't enjoying about the punishments we were getting, or, you know, and mom and dad would also have to say about goals that they were setting in their own life. And so it was a home where I suppose biblical values and principles were really cemented in. And of course, you go on to those sort of teenage years where we all, you know, push the boundaries and do crazy things. But I feel so grateful that, yes, I made very many mistakes, but there was always something that I was accountable to. And I think as teenagers, you know, you go through, and teenagers and go into those varsity years, you're not always going to be thinking back to what did mom and dad say I must do, what did they say is right or wrong, because you do go through a stage where you kind of don't really think your parents are so cool. Yeah, right. But if they've given you something deeper, so something or someone that you're accountable to that's bigger and deeper than them, and that's what I think my parents did do. So even when they weren't around in that bar or that party or whatever, there was something in there that was this accountability to God and to these set of values and to these roots on which I'd been raised that was so much greater than anything. So that really was a great privilege, and I hope that I can somehow do the same with my children. I would also have to say, you know, my mom, as a woman, she's the most remarkable lady. I watched her as a child supporting dad. And in very many ways, our lives have kind of mimicked each other. Although Gary's world in cricket's very far from Dad's as an evangelist, but they were both men in high-profile positions, both in positions of leadership, both travel a lot. So I suppose I watched the way that Mum very sacrificially gave of herself and her own life, and often her own. I think sacrificed a lot of her own personal ambitions to support Dad and to raise a family, how her children were a priority in that season of her life. And I think I've gained a lot of wisdom from Mum, and every time I'm in a jam and like, Mom, I can't cope with this, I don't know why I'm struggling, and you know, I still get on the phone to her, and often she's alone because Dad's traveling and I'm alone, and we sit on the phone and natter about
compare
life.
Notes.
Yeah, compare notes. So I think that's also been wonderful to watch her example.
How many children in the Cassidy household?
Also 3. Yeah, I have an older sister and a younger brother, so I'm the middle one. Yeah.
Okay, so you had good training, good foundations laid in your life. It's amazing how God prepares us for these things, eh?
Yeah, and you know, you never know, but it's amazing how I've seen my life, you know, in my parents' dad was also a writer and a speaker, and that's something that I've now, the world I've now moved into. So, you know, they always say that your children won't always listen to what you say, but they will always remember what you do.
That's right.
And I really feel that with mum and dad, that kids watch your parents closely, their own relationship, watching how they put such a priority on their marriage, and always guarded that and nurtured that. So I think we way underestimate how our childhoods and our growing up home and those roots affect our life as we grow up and move on and become our own, you know, become parents ourselves.
It's so important that you say that, Debbie, because, you know, in the world we live in today, women are encouraged to be career focused, climbing the corporate ladder, and then being the wife and the mother becomes secondary. And so we see a lot of that happening all around us, and the institution of marriage and family is devalued as a result of that. But it's obvious because of your foundations and your relationship with God. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you manage to maintain that relationship with God while running around and juggling career and mom and traveling and all of those things. But you obviously maintain your focus on your marriage and on your family. It's clear that that is priorities to you, and career and everything else comes after that. But an encouragement to women out there. There are women out there, Christian women as well, that are working, that have children, that are husbands that are working or traveling. What is your encouragement to them as far as these important aspects are concerned? Firstly, the relationship with God, how to maintain that, and then keep the focus on the wife and the mom before the career.
Errol, it's such a tough one. I think as women, I think it's something we struggle with every single day. And I suppose it comes down to us having priorities and understanding who we are, what we're about, and what are those priorities. You know, we've all heard that lovely analogy of the jar. And if we put the small stones in first and then try and fit the bigger ones, we will never fit them in. But put the bigger stones in first, and then, you know, we can filter in the sand and the smaller stones, and those sort of representing our priorities. And I think that being clear on that, so saying, okay, well, first of all is my relationship with God. How am I going to keep this going? How am I going to nurture it? And it's so hard as a busy mom. You know, you don't have this picture of waking up and having this wonderful long quiet time, because the first thing that wakes you up is a crying child or a this or a that. So I think it's being a bit kind to ourselves in the season of young children, and saying, you know what, I can be flexible, and I can put my worship music on while I'm doing the school runs, and try and have my quiet time or my time with God, you know, at 4 p.m. or at 11 a.m. And you know, I found, or for me, it's, you know, putting my worship music on and going for a run and saying, you know what, Lord, this is the only time I'm going to have for you today, but I'm going to spend it with you. So I think being kind to ourselves in the space, especially when we have very young children, babies, toddlers, you are just fighting exhaustion all the time. So I think mums need to forgive themselves a little bit, and I think God knows the season that we're in, but I think establishing that as a priority. And then I think our husbands, our relationship with our husbands. So often mums, we have kids, and these children just become everything. And you see it time and time again where, you know, because our husband is a big man and he can look after himself, well, we put him on the side and say, okay, well, I'll be back with you in a few years. But, you know, become all consumed with kids. And, you know, I'm just a big advocate of what on the marriage course they call marriage time, which is just sitting down with your husband and being really practical about it with your diaries and saying, you know what, we're going to put 2 hours aside at some stage this week that is just for you and me and without the kids. And
go out on a date.
yeah, go out on a date and move mountains to make that time happen.
Yes.
Because I think if you can just establish that bit of marriage time where you have that space to communicate without being interrupted with kids. And there's so many things, I'm a big advocate of going to bed at the same time as a couple, where you can just connect in that little bit of time before you go to sleep. And, so couples nowadays, they tend to be two ships in the night.
That's right.
He wakes up and is gone out the door and then he gets back late and then it's just kids and chaos and, the days can just click past. And, then one day when kids have left home, you have a husband and wife who look at each other and say, well,
You're strangers.
you're strangers.
So it's all about balance then.
The balance and then being very intentional about saying, these are the priorities in my life. God, my husband, my children, and work however you then try and fit that one in, which is a whole nother probably discussion altogether. And then being intentional about how you're going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not a very good time manager, but I do believe it comes down to that. Yeah.
I think that's the key, the priorities and sticking to your priorities. It's God first, that relationship with God, your husband or wife next, and then your children, and then your work. It's the same thing for me in running a ministry like Family Policy Institute. I've got to make sure that nothing comes before my relationship with my wife, first with God, then my wife, then my children, and then this ministry, the work I do.
Yeah.
And if we can, it's almost like getting up every morning and checking off the boxes that, Lord, am I doing this right? And I think we keep ourselves happy that way, and the balance is there, and we can manage all of the things that we need to manage if we keep our priorities right.
And it's very, very hard. And I think as women, I think it's also important to remember life happens in seasons.
Yes.
So when we have small kids, it is a very frustrating season because we literally have to often shelve our careers or our ambitions, but to realize, it's a short season. And, I was fortunate to be a journalist and a writer, so to have something I could kind of do on the side and juggle, but for some women that's not possible. But I think to realize that life does move in seasons. So,
And it looks like you moving into a season of being able to write again.
I hope so. Well, my youngest is 3, so I'm slowly getting there. I'm not quite yet because writing this book with the 3 kids was crazy.
I can imagine, because that's the next question I was going to ask you, but we have to go to a break, is that how you manage to get through an entire book, raising these children, traveling, doing all you do. It's an amazing achievement, but we'll get back to that after the break. So don't go away. More with Debbie Kirsten after the break. Welcome back to the program. I'm speaking to Deborah Kirsten about a new book, Chai Tea and Ginger Beer, which is an autobiography of her life, the wife of a legendary cricketer, Gary Kirsten, and the daughter of Michael Cassidy. Now, Debbie, we were talking about marriage and family issues in particular. And in the research we do here at Family Policy Institute, it's a tragedy to see that, for example, that only 35% of children live with both biological parents in South Africa. That means about 65% of children are living with a single parent, some of them no parents at all, very few with perhaps grandparents. We obviously as a nation heading in the wrong direction. Family, as you know, is the building block of society and the strength of our nation. One of the things I noticed in the media was about 2 years ago, Gary Kirsten was managing the Protea side, the South African cricket side, and it made huge news internationally and nationally when he decided to give up his career as the cricketing coach of the Proteas to focus on his family. Now, this is not often done in South Africa. Men are usually chasing position and money and status and all of these things. He did it about turn. You said the media or people didn't actually believe that was the reason, but obviously it was. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Errol, you know, Gary headed into that job with the Proteas very soon after our time in India. So we had done 3 years straddling, as we talked about earlier, straddling 2 continents. And it was a crazy time for us as a family. And as wonderful as it was, a great adventure, it was very stressful on our family. And then very soon after that came the request to coach South Africa. And obviously as a coach, it was something he'd always wanted to do, is coach his own country. And so the opportunity came up. It wasn't ideal timing because I actually then just after that found out I was pregnant with baby number 3. So we started on the South African job with the 2 boys who are now growing up, and Joshua was then, I don't know, 9 or something, and James about 6, and then a newborn. So now 3 kids traveling the globe with the Protea team and with a newborn thrown in the mix. And I think what really started, he did it for 2 years. And I think our tanks were pretty empty after the India run as a family, and then to do the 2 years. So we absolutely loved it, and it was the kind of dream job that he would have done forever if he could have, but it just became unmanageable from a family point of view. You know, our eldest was just getting to the point where it wasn't so easy just to pull him in and out of school, and now traveling with 3 kids and a little baby. And I think he also realized that as especially the boys were getting older, that he was really missing out and they were missing out. So there was Gary's always been, his big policy as a leader is to lead by example, to lead from the front, to lead by example, and to really create trust in the space of leadership. So for him, relations are very important when he's leading a team and I think what he really started to realize was, am I actually doing this in my own home and with my own children? And it just wasn't resting well. I think he felt he was more present and more there for the guys in the cricket team than he was his own 2 sons and his little daughter, and of course me. And so he did. He made that decision after 2 years to not renew his contract. They wanted him to renew the contract. So he did fulfill the full contract. But many people thought that he had said no to that because of, possibly political reasons or difficulties within the South African cricket setup. But it wasn't at all. It was a very, very happy setup. Wonderful guys he was working with. He loved, passionate about the work. But just really, we realized as a couple as well, we had to make some really tough choices. And I think that when you make a decision to put your family or your marriage first, I think you're always going to be confronted with tough choices. Yes. Because in this world, in this society, in this country, it's not easy to make decisions like that. It's so much easier to just go with where the money's good, where the glory is good, where the work is good. And I think we really realized that we had to make this a priority and be clear about it. And and we really haven't looked back. It was a fundamental change in our home and in our relationships, and certainly it's been for the boys. I mean, Gary always relates the story where it was a month or 2 after resigning from that, and he was saying goodnight to Joshua one night, and Joshua said, "Dad, it's so nice that you're here every night to say goodnight to me."
Wow, look at that.
Little things like that, and being able to go and watch the boys play their sport and take them to school and take out the garbage for me, do the little chores around the house. No, but just, to work as a team and be as a family. And we hadn't actually really ever had that. So it's wonderful to have that now. He still is very busy, and he still does a bit of traveling, but not even close to what it was. So it's been a really great decision.
But that decision was profound, because Gary Kirsten is now a great role model in this nation, because he made a decision for his family. And as I said, a lot of men don't make that decision. We see that in the research, that men are chasing status and power and position and all kinds of things. And because they're doing that, they neglect the marriage and the family. And the family and the marriage suffers. And when the family and the marriage suffers, the entire nation suffers. People don't realize that. That Gary's decision helps this nation because it inspires other men. He's somebody that millions of men look up to and admire. And when a man like that makes a decision to put his family and his marriage first, it has huge implications for our nation. I don't know if you realize that. Because every time a marriage breaks down and a family breaks down, this nation suffers. It harms everybody. It impacts every life. So marriage and family are fundamental institutions in society. And I thank God for, I can remember when I saw that in the news, that Gary Kirsten, he did the news conference and said, I'm doing this, I'm going to spend more time with my family. I said, yes, I love it when men do that, when they put their families first. Because a man is nothing more than what he is in his home. I mean, you know that. A man is nothing more than what he is in his home. So you got people, seeing, people on television, men on television, they're public successes, but then they're private failures. And that is a huge problem in South Africa. So the statistics I quoted earlier, that 35% of children live with both biological parents. That is a catastrophe because children need both parents. They need a mom and a dad. And a lot of the social ills that we combating and facing in South Africa is a result of family breakdown, dysfunctional families. So when it goes wrong in the family, it goes wrong everywhere. And of course, I'm preaching the converted here. You know this.
Well, I certainly found, Errol, that there was just a gap in our home that I, as a mom, couldn't fill. I was trying to play mom and dad all the time, and I have such respect for single moms who do juggle that. But we had a dad. There was a dad, but he was not present. And especially with little boys, as they were starting to get older, I was realizing, they don't want the pat on the back from me anymore. Right. They want it from dad. They need that affirmation from dad. They need that. And it's not just, I don't believe it's just quality time. I do believe it's quantity as well, to just show up at the odd music concert or the odd little thing. I think the boys need, the kids need the quality time. They need that, like Joshua said. I need you to be doing prayers with me every night when I go to sleep, not once a month. So there certainly was a role that only Gary, as a father, could fulfill for the kids.
Absolutely. So you could be the best mother possible, but you could never be a dad.
Could never be a dad, And I don't bowl very well. My boys tell me that all the time. And I don't know how to catch a rugby ball very well either.
So only Gary can do that. Now, those challenges, do you document that in your book?
Errol, I've really tried to keep this book very real. I thought there's no point in writing a book that's just going to sort of skate and skirt around the issues that families face, that marriages face, that women face. I even touch on the struggles that Gary had in that space of international sport, the pressure of it. I really tried to pick out stories that highlight those struggles and really be honest about them and be vulnerable. It wasn't easy, but really tried to be vulnerable about saying, this is the challenges that we faced as a married couple. And so that, not everyone is married to an international cricketer, but most of my friends have husbands who travel, and most marriages have very similar challenges that they face. So the people will pick it up and they'll read it and go, that's me, that's my life. So really try and connect with people on that level of, I'm just a mom struggling with this. I'm just a wife struggling with this. I'm just a woman struggling with this. So really keep it really real and honest. And I worked hard to do that, as hard as it is making yourself vulnerable in that space.
So, it's not the challenges, but it's how you deal with it. Obviously, everybody's going to face challenges in their marriage. But how you prepare yourself to deal with that and work through it, that's important.
And then, of course, the mistakes. You know, I'm not scared of writing about when we made the wrong decisions.
Yes.
And how that then impacted our life or our kids or our relationships. So I think it's also certainly, it's not a book where I say that, you know, Gary and I have got it all worked out by any means. It's I've tried to really share the things that we haven't got all worked out, and, you know, the process that we had to go on to find the right answers.
Yeah, you know, that's so important, because there's many women like you out there. You know, it's just so many women working, juggling careers, raising kids, husbands traveling, and this is an encouragement to them, like you say. People would look at you and say, wow, Deborah Kirsten, super mom. And I'm sure you don't see yourself as super mom. Yeah. You're working through this thing, but obviously, again, it comes through in your speech, is that your faith. Your faith is your foundation, undergirds you. What your mom and your dad inculcated in you, that has held you, has kept you. So facing challenges, everybody's going to face challenges, but how we work through it, that's the important thing. And I think you can be a great inspiration to many women out there that's facing similar challenges. And we're going to talk a little bit about your speaking. You're a motivational speaker as well. You go around to churches and conferences and help inspire women. And that's such a great thing. How we need women to inspire other women in this country today. But more with Deborah Kirsten when we come back after the break. Welcome back to the program. I'm speaking to Deborah Kirsten about a new book, Chai Tea and Ginger Beer. And so, Debbie, you say this has got nothing to do with chai tea or ginger beer. This is your memoir.
Well, it's definitely not a recipe book, Errol. No. Yeah,
autobiography of your life with Gary Kirsten, being the daughter of Michael Cassidy, and some of the challenges you faced. Now, we were talking about marriage and family issues, especially relating to South Africa. And there's a lot of women out there, I know, from the research again that passes our table here at Family Policy Institute. A lot of the legislation that government is busy working on is trying to address this problem through legislation, which that doesn't actually work. But so many single moms, so many women struggling with divorce issues. There's a lot of abuse in our country, and those stats are not going down. So women face a lot of challenges in South Africa. What is Debbie Kirsten's encouragement to the women out there?
I think, Errol, the challenges are so vast and so numerous that you know, we could sit here all day and talk about those. But I think one thing, you know, I think that women need to value themselves. They need to value their own stories. I certainly went through my own personal process, and I think part of it was through the writing of the book of learning to come to a place to say, you know, to believe that my story is important. My story has value. God created me with a story, and coming to a place of having the courage to share our stories. I think as women we can work a lot in community with one another and really help one another if we're brave enough to share our stories. So I always encourage women to enter into a space of community with other women where you can really be real, be real, be vulnerable about your struggles, about your stories, and share them. And the minute we start to share our stories, we realize we're not actually alone. Yeah. And we also realize our story is not just about us. It's about people around us and how we can positively affect their lives and their stories. And in South Africa, there's just so much opportunity to help those around us, those less privileged, those who are hurting and in pain and have suffered these dreadful things like rape and abuse. And so as women, let's be real about our stories. Let's reach out to other people, other women around us, and really through our stories connect and try and help one another and affect other lives in a positive way.
Yes. Now you obviously talking about these forums as within the church environment, Christian women getting together and supporting each other. But do you think the church is doing enough to reach out to women that's outside of the church to help with these issues?
I think some of the churches are. I feel very, very blessed in my own church. This conference I was talking about was really reaching out to non-Christian women, and just through that power of women sharing their stories, creating also a space where women can really hear how God has touched the lives of women's stories. So it's done in a very beautiful and interesting way. I think a lot of churches are probably not doing enough to reach out to women and those who are marginalized. But it's all very well, all of us saying, well, let's put it on the church, let's put it on the government. And as you say, legislation and those things are never going to, we have to look at ourselves and say, what am I doing? What am I doing in my home? How am I relating to my domestic worker and her family? How am I relating to my kids' teachers? So it's about in our everyday life taking that responsibility on ourselves to say, this is my story, and I want my story to have a positive influence on those around me. And I can do that if I take the initiative myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Debbie, you're taking this message around the country. You're a motivational speaker. Your message primarily is to women, to help them, to inspire them, how to deal with these challenges on a day-to-day basis. Is that what you do?
Yes, I do a lot of public speaking, and I love that space of just connecting with women. I think women do have just a natural way of being able to connect and being able to share and to just really encourage women. Certainly not to go around and say, I've got it all worked out, because I don't at all. But to say, what, we're all in this together and we're all struggling. And then obviously the message that, when we bring God into our stories and we sort of start to co-author our stories with him, that really our stories can just take on a whole new meaning and purpose. I begin the book with a quote by Mother Teresa, and she says, I am but the pen in God's hand. He is the author of my story.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, I really believe that, and I think that when we acknowledge that and say, God has authored this story, and I need to open my ears and listen and hear his voice and say, where does he want me in this story? What does he want me doing, in this country, in my home, in my marriage, in my family? And so that's a real part of my message, is for us really to dig deep into that space and saying, where should we be, and how should our stories be reading to the rest of the world?
And you are obviously available for conferences and churches out there that want to get hold of you to come and speak to women. How would they get hold of you? How do they contact you?
Errol, they could either go through my website, which is deborahkirsten.com, or through the email, which is chai and ginger, like the title, but just the chai and ginger @gmail.com. And yeah, I love that space of ministry. Obviously, my time is limited in between the travels, in between doing the mom duties, done grade 5 exams this past week, so I try and work it in as best I can, and also around Gary's schedule. But I'm always open to that.
How do people get hold of the book? Where are they available?
The book is in all the leading bookstores.
So Debbie, some final words of wisdom. You're a young mom in a very unique position, being the wife of a international cricket star. The daughter of a international respected Christian leader. You were a journalist in your own right. You were a mom of 3 young children. Yet you go around inspiring other women, speaking engagements, writing books. And again, I can't believe how you managed to complete a book like this with the raising of the children and the travels and everything else you're telling me. But that experience obviously helps you a lot. And as you said, your upbringing played a huge role in who you are today. Being raised, knowing Jesus Christ, your mom and dad, Michael and Carol Cassidy, instilling those values and principles in your life, which obviously haven't left you and prepared you for who you are today. So with all of that experience, just final words of wisdom you want to speak to the woman of South Africa?
South Africa. Well, I think my first thing it would be to say that I don't have it all worked out, and that as a woman, I'm just a woman dealing with the same struggles that they're dealing with. So I think my message would be, let's share. Let's share our stories. You know, I happen to write mine, but I would encourage women to tell their stories, to share with other women, to reach out to those around them, and let's just be real with one another. Let's be real with what we're dealing with, what we're juggling, and really try and help each other. Yeah.
So Deborah Kirsten, we want to thank you for coming into the studio, sharing a bit about your life and your experiences and your challenges, and also talking about chai tea and ginger beer that's available at all good bookstores around the country. And obviously the website address and email address is on your screen right now. If you want to get hold of Deborah, to invite her to speak at a conference or a church, or you want to know how to get hold of the book, you can contact her at the contact details on your screen. Deborah, thank you.
Thanks, Errol. Lovely being with you.
And use you mightily in this ministry because it's so needed. There's so much challenges out there that women are facing. I know that in the work we do, we're exposed to it all the time. And what we need is strong, godly women standing up and being a voice of inspiration, being a voice of encouragement to women out there. So we thank you for what you do, and may God bless you and your family.
Thank you so much.
That's our program for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Please visit our website at familypolicyinstitute.com and subscribe to my weekly newsletter. This is my primary method of communicating with you, so please subscribe today. If you have any comments or suggestions for the show, please write to us at info@familypolicyinstitute.com. We value your comments and your input. Remember, the latest edition of Joy magazine is available in retail stores right around the country. Please remember to get your copy. Thank you once again for joining us. God bless you, and remember to keep standing.